II. Dr. Joseph Mengele, you've heard of him too. The Angel of Death, he was infamous for carrying out macabre experiments on pregnant women, twins, and others at the Auschwitz death camp. And he eluded capture in South America for 30 years. Second only to Eichmann as a target of Nazi hunters, the doctor went by the name of Angel of Death, and he conducted macabre experiments among prisoners in the Auschwitz death camps. Now, he was an SS officer, and Mengele was sent at the start of World War II to the Eastern Front to repel the Soviets, and he actually received the Iron Cross for his bravery and service. But then he was wounded and declared unfit for active duty, so he was assigned to the Auschwitz death camp. There, he used the prisoners, particularly twins, pregnant women, and the disabled, as human guinea pigs. Mengele even tortured and killed children with his medical experiments. Now, after World War II, Mengele spent 3+ years hiding in Germany. In 1949, with the help of a Catholic clergy member, the Angel of Death fled Italy to Argentina, where he owned a mechanical equipment shop. He remarried under his own name in Uruguay in 1958. That's 13 years after the war. The doctor lived in various Buenos Aires suburbs, but after hearing of Eichmann's capture, he went underground, first in Paraguay, then later in Brazil. Remember that movie, Boys of Brazil? Same guy. Now, West Germany had sent an extradition request to Argentina, which dragged their feet, because they claiming the review was necessary because of the doctor's crimes had been political only. Nazi hunters pursued him for decades, but Mengele ultimately drowned off the Brazilian coast in 1979. He had a stroke, was in the water, and he drowned to death. Now, but because he had operated under an assumed name in Brazil, this wasn't known until his remains were forensically tested in 1985. So Joseph Mengele basically lived out his life in freedom. Never captured, never tried, never convicted. Number 3, Walter Rauff. He was an SS colonel, and Rauff was instrumental in the construction and implementation of mobile gas chambers responsible for killing an estimated 100,000 people during World War II. Now, according to the UK's MI5 intelligence agency, Rauff oversaw the modifications of trucks that diverted their exhaust fumes into airtight chambers in the backs of vehicles capable of carrying as many as 60 people. Now, the trucks were driven to burial sites, and along the way, victims would be poisoned or asphyxiated by the carbon monoxide in the trucks. After persecuting Jews in a Vichy France-controlled Tunisia between 1942 and 1943, Rauff then oversaw Gestapo operations in northwest Italy. There, just like in Tunisia, Rauff gained the reputation for both utter ruthlessness and infamous indiscrimination of execution of both Jews and local partisans. Now, Allied troops arrested Rauff at the end of the war. He escaped an American POW camp and hid in Italian convents. After serving as a military advisor to the president of Syria back in 1948, he fled back to Italy and escaped to Ecuador in 1949 before settling in Chile, where he lived freely under his own name. He was never captured, and Rauff worked as a manager of a king crab cannery and actually spied for the West Germans between 1958 and 1962. His whereabouts became known after a letter requesting that his German naval pension be sent to a new address in Chile. So get this, he was changing his address, and he said he wanted more of his pension money sent to a new address. That's how they found out about him. He told them. He was arrested in 1962 in Chile, but freed by the country's Supreme Court the following year. Chilean President Augusto Pinochet repeatedly resisted calls from West Germany for Rauff's extradition. He died in Chile in 1984. German and Chilean mourners at his funeral gave Nazi salutes and chanted Heil Hitler at the funeral. Never tried, never convicted, never extradited, and lived until 1984. Franz Stengel. He was called the White Death because he wore a white uniform and carried a whip. Stengel worked at the Actanon T4 euthanasia program, in which the Nazis killed those with mental and physical disabilities. He later served as the commandant of Sobibor and the Pribcke death camps in Poland. More than 100,000 Jews are believed to have been murdered during his tenure before he moved on from Sobibor to Pribcke, where he was directly responsible for the Nazis' second deadliest death camp. 900,000 people were killed there. Now, his path to South America, again, via that rat line. The rat line was the method in which the war criminals went from Europe to South America. But via the rat line, he went to South America. At the end of the war, actually, before he went to South America, he was arrested and captured by the Americans, but escaped to Italy from an Austrian prison camp. He was assisted by a Nazi sympathizing bishop, the infamous Alois Hudal, who helped other Nazis as well escape. Stengel traveled to Syria on a Red Cross passport. Then he sailed to Brazil in 1951. He worked at a Volkswagen plant in Sao Paulo under his own name, but then was arrested in 1967 after being tracked down by Simon Wiesenthal, the famous Nazi war criminal hunter and Holocaust survivor. He was extradited to West Germany. Stengel was tried and found guilty of the mass murder of 900,000 people. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. He died of heart failure in prison in 1971. Number 5, Joseph Schwamberger. He was another Austrian Nazi, and Schwamberger was an SS commandant in charge of 3 labor camps in the Jewish ghettos of Nazi-occupied Poland during World War II. Brandishing a horsewhip and a German shepherd trained to attack people, he arrived in 1944 at the Rosato forced labor camp, where prisoners died by the hundreds, many shot by Schwamberger himself. In 1943, he organized the mass execution of 500 Jewish prisoners at the, let me get this right, Pribcke death camp. He actually shot them in the back of the head and dispatched Jews to the Auschwitz death camp. In Mielek, another camp in 1944, he cleansed the city of Jews. His path was littered with corpses, said Nazi war criminal hunter Simon Wiesenthal. He was arrested in Austria in 1945. Schwamberger escaped to Italy in 1948, and months later arrived in Argentina, where he lived openly under his own name and actually obtained Argentinian citizenship. Now, he was sought by West Germany for extradition in 1973. He went back into hiding, but was eventually arrested by Argentinian officials in 1987 after an informant responded to the German government's $300,000 reward. He returned to West Germany in 1990 to stand trial. 1990, 45 years after the war. Witnesses at the trial said they had seen Schwamberger throw prisoners into bonfire, kill Jews kneeling beside mass graves, and slam children's heads against wall because, quote, he didn't want to waste a bullet on them. In 1992, he was found guilty of 7 counts of murder and 32 counts of accessory to murder, sentenced to life in prison. He died in prison in the year 2004 at the age of 92. 2004. 60 years. Is that 60 years? Yeah, 60 years almost after the end of World War II. Number 6, Erich Pribcke. He was a mid-level SS commandant and member of the Gestapo. Pribcke participated in the 1944 Adriatine Caves massacre in Rome, in which the Nazis slaughtered 335 people for retaliation of the killing of 33 German SS members by Italian partisans. Now, Pribcke admitted killing 2 Italians, but claimed he was just following orders. He also signed off on the transport of 200,000 Roman Jews to Auschwitz. He escaped prison in Britain. He was in a British prisoner of war camp and escaped by cutting through barbed wire while his guards were drunk. With the help of, again, Bishop Alois Hudal, Pribcke fled to Argentina on a falsified Red Cross passport in 1948. He settled in the idyllic mountain town of San Carlos Bariloche in the Patagonia region, beautiful part of the world, where he operated a Viennese deli and worked in a German school, living under his own name. Now, it wasn't until 1994, but Pribke's past was revealed to the world after an ambush interview by ABC newsman Sam Donaldson. And I remember when this happened. It was just 1994, not that long ago. Now, as a result of the uproar following the interview, Pribcke was extradited to Italy, where he was convicted of war crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment to be served under house arrest. He died in 2013 at the age of 100. Just 8 years ago, he died. At the age of 100. Amazing. Number 7. Last, and certainly not least, Gerhard Bohn. Bohn was a lawyer and an SS officer. Bohn headed the Third Reich's work group of sanatoriums, nursing homes, and was responsible for the administrative logistics of Hitler's Acheon T4 euthanasia program. Now, he claimed to be just a mercy killer, but Bohn was actually one of the leaders who carried out a systematic extermination of Germans, his own people. Why? In order to purify the Aryan race and avoid state expenditures on those with mental and physical disabilities. In other words, they weren't fit to live. So why even spend money on institutionalizing these guys and gals? All told, this program killed some 200,000 Germans with incurable diseases, mental illnesses, and other handicaps. Victims were led to gas chambers in the institutions and then cremated. The program served as a trial run for the mass extermination of camps later operated by the SS. Bohn was thrown out of the Nazi Party after submitting a report accusing his agency of fraud and corruption. After the war, Bohn fled to Argentina, disguised himself as a technician for the military under the country's president, Juan Perón. He later admitted that Perón's helpers gave him money and identity papers. Now, he lived just fine in Argentina until a coup d'etat deposed Juan Perón. Bohn then returned to Germany and was indicted by a court in Frankfurt in 1963. He was released on bail. He escaped again to Argentina, where he was finally extradited 3 years later as the first Nazi war criminal surrendered by Argentina. So yes, Argentina didn't surrender a Nazi war criminal until 1966. Declared unfit to stand trial, Bohn survived another 15 years in prison until he died in 1981. Now, a couple of things on these 7 monsters. Many of them never paid for their crimes. None of them paid for their crimes properly, except for maybe Eichmann. Okay, he was brought to justice fairly quickly and executed. Well, fairly quickly, 1962, less than 20 years after the war. But many of them just escaped scot-free. Now, I mentioned many people from the church, and they helped these Nazi war criminals. Now, some of them did willingly, knowingly. Some of them did not. Some of them were helping groups of people, and in helping large groups of people, the war criminals were mixed in with the mess. In other words, they were trying to do the best thing, but the not so best thing worked out. We talked about the bishop, the Vatican bishop, who actually helped many Nazi war criminals escape to South America. Alois Hudal, who was a bishop, who actually, after the church found out that he was doing this, he wasn't excommunicated, but he was stripped of all power